Hello, I'm back. See where I am. You see behind me? That's the Sky Bridge. I don't know if you see it properly, but anyway, it's a nice morning. Look, the sun on my hair. So I've been busy because the school have started again, so I had to more or less to work as well. So I've started working too, but I'm planning to do about minimum two videos a month or something like that. So it's each video it's with a subject behind it, so it takes me time and so on. So today I want to talk about Matthias Desmet. And so Matthias Desmet is Belgian, and he studied statistics first, but then he also studied clinical psychology. So he's a professor of clinical psychology at Gand. So it's in Belgium university. So those who know about what happened during the corona crisis, those who were already aware of what was happening probably have heard about him, because in 2021, 2022, he was really famous. He was all in all alternative media talking and speaking up, and So, but some of them, some of you might not know him. So what he talked about was about what he calls the mass formation process, and it's how more or less he explains how a totalitarian state is created. So, and I've always been interested in psychology all my life, in mass psychology, and why people, do things, and, collectively, and, I've always been interested in, the Shoah and the world wars and all these things. So I'm really excited about this subject. I hope you like it too. If you don't know Matthias Desmet, what he says really makes sense when you think about it. So let's start with it. So I've taken a video, an interview that he did with Tucker Carlson. So more or less I took the transcription and I put it down in written, and I've changed a bit the wording and so on. And so that's what I've done, but there's plenty of interviews of him around here. It's like you just put his name on YouTube and you find plenty of stuff. But most videos he just repeats himself. He explains, what's the mass formation process and so on. So let's start. So where can I start? So what happened for him? So it's first of all, when he worked on statistics, he did a PhD and on statistics, and his PhD was about the what you call the academic papers. I think it was in 2003, so it's a while back, it's a long time ago. And he realized that 85% of academic papers, all the figures and so on, and the results they were giving in their papers were flawed. So flawed for different reasons, like maybe the technique they were using would only lead to flawed result, or maybe they were over exaggerating or something like that, just to get the result they wanted. So, and when he looked at it, he saw that only a small numbers of scientists would recognize that this result could only be flawed. So that's when he realized that, you have to be very careful with what you call science and rational understanding of things, and so yeah, so that's the first part. So that led him, when the corona started, really at first, that it helped him to understand that, all the numbers they were giving on TV and so on, like if we don't lock down, there will be that number of deaths and all these things, and all these scary numbers they were giving, nothing never happened. They were big numbers, like, they were very scary at the time. I don't know if you remember. And he said all these numbers were actually bullshit. So that's when he started to speak up. And so he started very, very early to try to, he wrote several articles, press articles, and trying to show people that all these figures, all the measures they were putting in place didn't make sense at all. And he realized that nobody was listening. People were just into the narrative and they were all scared, and so he stopped doing that. And that's what so it took me a few months. He kind of retreated himself, and it took him a few months to understand what was going on, why people were following the narrative while everything was absurd. So that's when he realized that it was a mass formation case. And so for him, mass formation, so that's how totalitarianism is created. So, and first of all, I will explain. So there's a difference between dictatorship and totalitarian state. So a dictatorship, it's where, it's somebody taking over, but with violence, so a coup d'etat or whatever. And usually, so a dictator, people are scared of him. But with a totalitarian state, it's all, people are not aware they are in a totalitarian state. It's all made through propaganda, and people are kind of hypnotized. That's why, it's so dangerous. So for Matthias Desmet, there's 4 different things that can lead to a totalitarian state, and it's all in the state of mind of people. So the first one is, so we'll take the example with the corona anyway. It's so the first thing they need to get a totalitarian state, is people need to start feeling disconnected. And socially isolated. So if you see back then, that's true that, more and more people recently have been feeling, very lonely. And, it's not recent. It's not since 2020. It started well before, especially with the internet. Now everything is online and people don't meet up. They don't have a social life anymore. They don't really have friends, or, it's all online. So that's the first thing. The second one is that people need to have no feeling of that their life has no aim or no sense. Or it's like, for example, what he was talking about the bullshit jobs. So when you've got your life, you've got your routine, and you're totally isolated, you have no friends or anything, and on the top of that, it creates like, your life has no meaning at all. So that's another, level that leads to totalitarianism. And so the third one is what he called floating anxiety. It's because once you feel isolated, once you can't see any meaning in your life, you start to have that floating anxiety, constantly, and you don't really understand why. And I don't know if you remember, just before everything started, you always had that, anxiety in the air, floating, and people wouldn't put a finger into it. They wouldn't understand. And the fourth thing is the aggressivity. So once you're feeling anxious all the time, especially, as well, when everything on TV, the constant fear they are giving us, with, there's always something, somebody being killed, or, there was a lot of terrorism at the time, especially in France, So once people are always feeling anxious, and, they start to be aggressive and behave in an aggressive manner. So for him, that's the first four steps of leading to a totalitarian state. And once you get there, you could feed people with a narrative. And so what people need at that time, they're so desperate because their life has no meaning. They're so aggressive, they're anxious, they're not well, Once you are at that stage, you can feed them a narrative, like you can start your propaganda. So people need at that stage, they need, an object, a lack of anxiety, and they need a solution. So once so for example, the corona, you had that. pandemic, that virus, that deadly virus. And the solution was all the absurd measures like lockdowns and all these things. And suddenly, that's when it gets more and more dangerous, because once you give an answer to the problem, you give us a sudden problem to everything, to that anxiety and so on. So once you give them a solution to the problem that was actually created by the state or the elites, people suddenly feel all connected together again. But it's dangerous because it's not a connection to the people, to the individual. It's a connection to the collectivity, which means, for example, and behind the collectivity is the state, it's for the greater good. All the measures were for the greater good. So, yeah, so look at the corona. So, for example, like people, they, you don't, like, the example, like, you couldn't go and visit your family in the nursing homes or at the hospital or anything. So it was for the greater good. It wasn't, there was a reason. So Matthias Desmet explained that's when it's very dangerous. So he takes the example. He spoke to a woman, and I find the interview online, but I think it's in Dutch or something. It's not in French or English, so I couldn't, understand it. So he spoke to a woman, and she explained she saw, I think it was in Iran or something, that because people buy so much into the narrative, they can't see that they are being psychology, controlled. That's when people do terrible things. So he takes the example of that woman in Iran. I have the word in French. She gave the name of her son to the state. He did something, and they killed the son. And when they hanged him, she put she helped them to kill her son. So that's when it leads to family, not being, attached one to each other. That's when it starts really to be dangerous. So yeah, let's see. He talks about a lot of things, as well, a few other things. But it's really interesting. You should see look at the video, or look at the transcription I've made for you. So, but I will take my example because I like taking examples, and it helps you to understand how dangerous it is. When I talk about the aggressivity and so on, I remember, so at the time I was working in a supermarket, and I was buying into the narrative so much, and I was really serious about it, really aggressive, and I was one of the first one to wear my mask. I started maybe in March, April. I was already wearing a mask, and when it got compulsory to wear a mask in the UK, I was always very mean to people who wouldn't wear it. I remember I was really, really mean. So it's how far it goes. People just get aggressive and turn to each other, and it's just for what they call the common good, which in that case, it's been shown a few times. It's people who don't want to see it yet. It means like, they are so hypnotized, it was absurd. All the figures, everything behind was absurd. All the strategy they were using, and it's been a few years now. People, I think, should have the more, be able to see more. What happened was totally absurd. So yeah, I think it's important you are all aware of that. So we are leading to a totalitarian state, but I think it has been stopped. So Matthias Desmet said, what can we do about it? So he took the example of Russia, the Soviet Union, and the Germany, the Nazi Germany. And he said in this case, all people that understand what's going on, they need to carry on talking. It's really important to carry on talking, and talking won't wake people up. You might manage to wake one or two, but it won't wake the mass up. But what it will do is it will stop the narrative to go deeper and deeper and more dangerous, So it's important, even if you don't change everything, you make the propaganda kind of stop, or just, you make it like go slowly and slower. And according to him, what happens is, whatever happens, always, the masses always destroy their narrative. It always ends at some point. If you carry on to speak up, at some point they will just destroy themselves. And I think that's what's happening today. They can't do much about it. I think they just failed in their totalitarianism. So they might try something else. But concerning the corona and all that rubbish, it's all gone. I think it's all gone. And people are more aware, even still a big number of them follow the narrative. So what he said as well, I forgot to tell you at the start, is so to start their propaganda, they need about 20 to 30% of people really buying into the narrative. If they get that numbers, they can go for it, because the other 60-65% will kind of see something is wrong, but they just follow the mass. The ones that are, they don't really have an opinion on anything. They just follow the mass, the main, the group that has the main voice, So these ones, that's what they do. They just follow the main group, whatever happens, So it would go the other way. They just follow the other group, and only 5%, so the dissidents, are the ones that speak up. Yes. So he took another example, is the example of the gulags. So he studied a lot of authors, and even if you look at Primo Levi, I don't know if you've heard about Primo Levi here, he talked about the concentration camps. It was Primo Levi was my subject, in France to get my degree. So I'm really into that. So, but these people explain that when you are in a very hard situation, how hard it can be, the most important thing is to stay true to yourself. When you speak up, you have to speak up in an honest way. You don't have to be aggressive to people, but you need to stay true to yourself. And if you keep your humanity in mind, if you don't follow the narrative, if you don't just, you get in a concentration camp and you just suddenly get depressed and, follow whatever they do, if you do what they tell you to do, that's when you go deeper and deeper in the hole. But if you keep your humanity, that's when you have the most chances of surviving. If he really thinks that people that survive in these cases are the ones that always keep their humanity and stay true to themselves. So yes, that's my last message. Is quite, I don't think that narrative worked, and whatever happens in life, just stay true to yourself and keep your humanity. So thanks a lot. Bye bye.